Okay, Final Fantasy VII. I'm gonna be honest, what can be said about Final Fantasy VII that hasn't already been said before? I mean, the game's been out for 26 years, and the internet is chock full of people dissecting it, analyzing it, and theorizing about the future of it. People have been talking about this game for so long, because they've loved this game for so long, and they refuse to let it go. But, why? What is it that made this blocky retro 90s game different from all the rest of them, enough to warrant its own multi-part remake series over 20 years later, and amass a dedicated following of fans from all different ages? Maybe it was the revolutionary, never-before-seen 3D computer-generated character models that came alive in beautifully rendered FMV cutscenes? No. Perhaps it was the fully customizable combat experience that allowed players to experiment and get creative with their gameplay? No, that's not it either. Was it the iconic and terrifying villains set up masterfully and meticulously throughout the story? No. Was it the snowboarding? No. Was it the chocobo racing? No! Was it Tifa? No! There is one thing that, apart from any other video game before it, set Final Fantasy VII apart and burned it into the memories of all the unsuspecting souls who dare to come across it. When you first boot up Final Fantasy VII, be it the 1997 original classic or the 2020 remake, you're able to discern the course of the story almost instantly. You're an ex-soldier, badass mercenary who embarks on a reluctant journey to help a righteous, albeit radical, group of eco-terrorists save the future of the planet from the evil Shinra Corporation. It's a simple yet engaging conflict, and even though this was the first Final Fantasy game to be more modern and steampunk rather than the high fantasy games that came before it, for JRPG, story's pretty standard. You know, hero stop bad guy. You meet Barret, the good-hearted leader of Avalanche. You meet Tifa, the reserved but caring childhood friend of the main hero. You meet Aerith, the cheerful flower seller, also the last surviving member of an ancient race. Ragtag as you all are, your misfit band of adventurers embarks to take down the evil Shinra Corporation, and later, the even bigger threat, the self-proclaimed rightful ruler of the planet, Sephiroth. Through your journey to save the planet, you collect new party members, travel to different locations, and learn about the world and your companions as you go. You come to care for them throughout the story, each segment of the game focusing primarily on one character or the other. Again, classic RPG. It isn't until over halfway through the story that things change. The game doesn't change, the goal doesn't change, we're still on a mission to defeat Sephiroth, but the feelings the average player has for the game changes, because the developers decided to dive into more unconventional waters. Waters so deep that the realism and abruptness of them was something that nobody at the time really saw coming. In a quote from Tetsuya Nomura, he says, "To tell you the truth, Final Fantasy VII's theme was life. We had instructions from Mr. Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, saying, more than depicting life in the theme, you have to depict life and death. With the death of a character, we wanted the player to feel pain. So, to portray death properly, it was decided that we would show Aerith's death." To me, I think Aerith's death is significant for a multitude of different reasons. While she is in no way the first character to get killed off in a video game, the presentation of her death scene and its aftermath is what makes it stand out amongst other games, and it makes it stick with us. What I mean is that it is uncomfortably familiar. Let me explain. Since media has begun, be it books or comics or games or movies or shows, there's always been a goal that the writers and the developers need to achieve. That goal is to make the audience care about their characters. Because if they care about the characters, they'll care about the story. A lot of time can go into crafting these characters, sometimes years to get everything just right. And that's fantastic, because it does usually help us care for them more, being fleshed out, multidimensional, or even not fleshed out or multidimensional, but just fun or funny or interesting. Here's the thing. These meticulously crafted characters can become somewhat precious to both their creators and audiences alike, so it's very rare for us to see them die. It's even more rare for us to see them actually die. With many cases where main characters are killed off, it's much more likely for them to be resurrected, or to retcon the fact that they never died, or do something that gives the audience peace of mind, a happy ending of sorts. After all, who doesn't love a happy ending for the characters they love? And I think this occurrence has only gotten worse over recent years, especially with franchises like Marvel, for example, who have literally conditioned their audience to not believe any death they see, even if it is on screen right in front of their faces, because they fooled their audiences time and time again by bringing back dead characters. But it's not just the creator's fault. The truth is, when a character we love dies in a movie or a book or a game, we, audiences, know that it's a piece of media, so there is an underlying hope that Hollywood fictional magic will let the characters survive, because we know that death in media doesn't always follow the rules of real life. This is where Final Fantasy VII was different. The original director of FF7, Yoshinori Kitase, said, "In the real world, things are very different. You just need to look around you. Nobody wants to die that way. People die of disease and accidents. Death comes suddenly, and there is no notion of good or bad. It leaves not a dramatic feeling, but great emptiness. When you lose someone you loved very much, you feel this big empty space and think, if I had known this was coming, I would have done things differently." These are the feelings I wanted to arouse in the players with Aerith's death relatively early in the game. Feelings of reality, and not Hollywood. Aerith's life is gone from the moment Sephiroth retracts his sword that has impaled her. It's just as Kitase said, death comes suddenly. With Aerith, there was no tearful goodbye, no last words to the party, nothing to even prepare us for the moment except for the brief few seconds when we see Sephiroth descend from the sky. It's over in just a matter of seconds. We feel the despair as each of her companions and friends come to bid their final farewells to her body, her theme playing solemnly in the background, before she's lowered into the water. Her resting place for all of eternity. And she doesn't come back. Ever. People have tried to save and resurrect her. Oh, believe me, they have tried. But all of it was futile. They couldn't save her. Because that's not how death works in the real world. That's not how death works in Final Fantasy VII. Or is it? More on that later. So, that's it, right? We're now able to answer the question that was posed at the beginning of this video. The thing that makes Final Fantasy VII different from any other game before it is that Aerith dies, and you cannot bring her back. Well, that's part of the answer, sure, but not entirely. You see, this video actually isn't about Aerith's death. In fact, it's not even about Aerith at all. This video is about the reaction that one particular character has to the death of Aerith, and how his experience with grief both demonstrates the genius of Final Fantasy VII's storytelling and provides a perfect representation of the emotions of the game's own fanbase. This video is about Cloud's strife. Let's start from the beginning. Cloud was born in the backwater mountain town of Nibelheim, a rural, traditional, nothing really special about it village. Because of his family history, Cloud was always destined for loneliness and isolation from the moment he was born. His mother Claudia was only about 17 years old when she gave birth to him, and shortly after, Cloud's father, a traveler, left for the mountains where he presumably died. The villagers in Nibelheim had very traditional views for their women, so they shunned Cloud's family, unable to accept the idea of a single mother carving out her own way in life without a man, let alone one who left under mysterious circumstances after an implied unmarried affair. It also meant that Cloud grew up without a father figure, something that would heavily impact his development as he grew up. He never fit in with the other village boys, and they didn't seem to like him much anyways. The only one he saw any promise in was his pretty neighbor, Tifa Lockhart, who he had a bit of a crush on, but never talked too much. Quite the opposite, actually. Cloud usually avoided Tifa, and always declined invitations from her and her friends to hang out. That is, until a certain incident occurred in which Tifa, while climbing Mount Nibel on a quest to find her recently deceased mother, fell off a cliff, and Cloud, attempting to save her, fell with her. The village blamed Cloud for the incident and believed that even though Tifa later ended up surviving the incident, that she could have died because of him. This event has a major impact on Cloud. He becomes more aggressive. He gets into fights with the other boys and is isolated by the village even more than he already was. His insecurity overwhelms him, leaving him untrusting, bitter, and with a deep, deep desperation to prove himself. Then he hears about Sephiroth, the well-decorated Shinra soldier first-class war hero Sephiroth. Cloud, as a young teenage boy, becomes obsessed with Sephiroth, more so the idea of him and what he represents. He's strong, he's masculine, he's liked. He has people who acknowledge and praise him. It's not hard to see why Cloud imprinted so intensely here. First of all, as we've already mentioned, Cloud has never had any male role model to take after or learn from, and he's already deeply insecure and lonely. And then here comes this hero who embodies everything he's ever wanted. And the only tangible thing Cloud can do to be just like him is to become a soldier. Cloud gets it in his young mind that if he becomes a legendary soldier, the best of the best,
like Sephiroth,
he will be noticed, he will be liked, he will be strong enough to save the people he cares about.
Yeah, so I won't be back for a long time.
Guess not. Think you'll be in the papers?
I'll try.
In his eagerness, he tells Tifa of his great plan. Shocked as she is that Cloud is actually talking to her, but she asks Cloud to promise that when he becomes a hero, he will come back to save her if she is ever in trouble, in which Cloud agrees.
I promise.
So, when the spring comes, Cloud leaves his hometown to become a child soldier at the ripe old age of 14. Or, according to the remake timeline,
It was spring, so 13.
he was 13? Oh, Shinra, when I get my hands on you! But even after all that effort, all that talk, all that determination, it doesn't work. Cloud fails to get into Soldier. And I see a lot of people online say how they are genuinely confused as to why Cloud gets rejected from the program, even though he's physically very strong and great at combat. But another part of the Soldier test is that you need to be strong mentally. Why? Well, because Shinra is going to inject alien cells into your bloodstream, and you need to have a strong enough will and sense of self not to completely collapse under the alien's strong influence. But shh, nobody knows that yet. Cloud, unsurprisingly, does not have a strong sense of self, so he doesn't make it into the program. Completely unlike the cool, the confident, the strong, the Gungaga, Zack Fair. Shortly after Cloud is rejected from Soldier and relegated to being a Shinra infantryman, he meets Zack. Like Sephiroth, Zack embodies everything Cloud wants to be. He's a well-liked, strong, masculine soldier guy. The difference between Zack and Sephiroth being that, well, Zack becomes Cloud's friend. Yay! Our boy's first friend. The two are able to work together on multiple missions over the course of the next 2 years. All the while, Cloud continues working as a Shinra grunt, not really keeping in contact with the folks back in his hometown, but hoping for better days ahead. Then, well, you know what happens next. The famed Nibelheim incident. Cloud, Zack, and Sephiroth, and this guy, are tasked with investigating the malfunctioning reactor in Nibelheim. Here's the thing. Cloud left his hometown after telling everyone he was going to be a soldier. In his eyes, that's how he's able to have value as a person. So, in his shame and embarrassment of failing to complete his goal, he hides his face under his helmet to everyone in the village, with the exception of his mother. He does his best especially to conceal his identity from Tifa. After all, she's the one he vowed his plans to.
Would it kill this guy to say something?
What happens next is chaos. Sephiroth and Zack investigate the reactor. There, Sephiroth learns the truth of his origins, goes on a rampage, and sets the village of Nibelheim ablaze. Cloud witnesses the horrific death of his mother at the hands of Sephiroth before making his way to the Nibelheim reactor, where he sees first the dead corpse of Tifa's father, then the mortally wounded Tifa, who, as far as Cloud knows, has injuries so severe that he assumes she's died as well. He then sees a defeated Zack, who begs Cloud to finish the job and kill Sephiroth himself. Cloud takes Zack's Buster Sword and catches Sephiroth off guard enough to run him through with it, but Sephiroth is stronger than Cloud. He impales him with his Mooning Sword, enraged that a mere grunt could dare get the best of him. Cloud, in his grief-stricken rage and using the sheer force of his will, finds it in him to lift Sephiroth up using the sword as leverage and throw Sephiroth into the Mako below, killing him. Did I mention he's 16 at the time? Oh my god! The unconscious Zack and Cloud are taken, along with the other Nibelheim survivors, by Professor Hojo and used as test subjects for his Genova experiments for the next 4 years. Zack is unaffected by the experiments as he's already gone through the soldier enhancement process, but Cloud, as we mentioned earlier, has a very weak mentality and therefore succumbs and develops a severe case of Mako poisoning, rendering him catatonic for the course of the next year as Zack carries the sick Cloud with him to Midgar after their escape. However, just outside of the city, the Shinra forces that had been tracking the pair have caught up. Zack leaves Cloud protected behind the nearby rocks and goes to fight them himself, but he's overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. He lays on the ground, bleeding out and covered in bullet holes. And for whatever reason, this is the moment that Cloud just barely starts to break out of his Mako-induced coma. He crawls towards Zack.
Zack,
Confused and delirious.
you're gonna...
Nearly parroting Zack's own words back to him.
live. You'll be my living legacy.
Zack gives him his Buster Sword. Tells him he has to live.
I'm your living
To be his living legacy. And then he dies. And this is where it all goes wrong. This is why I spent the last however many minutes telling you about Cloud's story, his background, his trauma, because it all pays off here. Cloud's life up to this point has been a combination of all sorts of tragedies and failures. Failure to achieve his dreams. Failure to save the people he loves. He witnessed the death of his mother and, to his knowledge, Tifa, and most significantly, after his incredibly fragile and poisoned mind is just barely starting to gain some awareness, the first thing he comprehends upon waking is the bloody and brutal death of his best friend, his only friend, the only person he has left, Zack. Cloud has experienced so much trauma without any time to process it, until this moment right here where he has so many things to grieve that he doesn't even know where to start. It's too much. The death of Zack being the final catalyst for his severe mental break. This moment is so interesting to watch Cloud grieve because he doesn't. He is far too overwhelmed. So, as a coping mechanism, and with a little help from the shape-shifting Genova cells in his body, Cloud subconsciously creates a new life story for himself. One where his trauma and pain are gone. His story? One where he did make it into Soldier, first class even. He achieved everything he'd ever wanted. And Zack never existed. After all, how can Cloud grieve him if he doesn't exist? Basically, in short, to protect himself from the pain, Cloud's mind chooses denial. As we all know, there are 5 stages of grief. While not everyone who experiences trauma will go through all 5, and others might revisit certain stages multiple times, this framework is helpful for understanding the wide varieties of emotions that someone who is healing from trauma may feel, and there is a basic linear timeline. The very first stage, before anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance, is denial. When something truly terrible happens in your life, it can be difficult to believe. The first thoughts people might experience are, this can't be happening, this can't be real, or this is just a dream. All of these are manifestations of psychological denial. And while I did just mention that the 5 stages of grief aren't always linear, denial is the first one for a reason, because it's the first one most people experience. And going back to Cloud, he seems to immediately get stuck here without ever going through the other stages. Stuck in that thinking of, again, this can't be real. And he seems to take this statement quite literally. Now, obviously there are some supernatural elements at play here. Genova cells copying some of Zack's memories, Mako poisoning severely weakening Cloud's mental state, and just overall video game plot writing. But I think the way that Cloud's grief, or more specifically his lack of grief, is portrayed at this point in the story is a really great visual representation of the general concept of denial, and it can teach us a lot. While Cloud has subconsciously created this new persona and life story for himself, he hasn't been completely absolved of his trauma. The cracks still shine through, and he still gets triggered by certain things. We see this a lot in FF7 Remake and Rebirth, where Cloud experiences flashbacks and severe headaches when reminded of certain traumatic events from his past. For example, seeing the burning buildings in Midgar reminds him of the burning of Nibelheim. Being in the lab where he was experimented on causes him to recall Hojo's voice during Cloud's own experimentation. And even the mention of certain things like what happened to Zack, or just Zack's name itself, causes Cloud notable mental and physical stress. His mind and his body still subconsciously know what happened to him, and he continues to feel that pain, even if he's confused as to why. The game doesn't always point this out, but if you pay attention, the signs are there, just like how they would be in real life. Sometimes those suffering from trauma, big or small, may deny their experiences, but the fact is that they still happened, and nothing in the world can change that. People, without even facing their pain, can still be hurt by it. I think that's why it's so incredibly hard for the healing process to begin for so many people out there, and why some will go years, decades, even lifetimes without ever making peace with their traumas, because acknowledging, let alone admitting, let alone accepting that you've been hurt, or abused, or damaged, or changed in any way can be so hard.
It's nothing.
Cloud is an extreme case of denial, yes, but he's also not. The mind is a very powerful tool, and just like Cloud's, it is able to rewrite your memories.
Soldier first class.
To block certain ones out.
Zack.
And to ultimately change your personality as a result of what has happened to you.
But you know what I think?
Not interested.
These are real defense mechanisms to dealing with trauma, and we are shown this in FF7. Denial is essentially the basis for the entirety of Cloud's character, and I think that's such an amazing thing. It's incredible that there's a video game that can teach us about mental health and grief, and can show us a protagonist who is suffering, who is forced to be weak. I think that's beautiful. For me, as a teenager struggling with severe anxiety and depression in 2019, playing the original FF7 for the first time was a really warm and just comforting experience. I loved that I was able to connect my hardships with this little blonde boy who was trying to be tough, but underneath it all was really struggling with mental health. I remember being so incredibly moved because I had never yet played a game where its protagonist, especially its male protagonist, was allowed to be so vulnerable. Through Cloud's navigation of his struggles, I felt more understood. I felt like the game found me when I needed it most, because it had lessons to teach me. My favorite scene of all time still sticks with me to this day, and it happens during the sequence of Aerith's death. In the original game, right after Sephiroth kills Aerith and her white materia falls into the waters below, Cloud scrambles forward to catch her body. He tries to shake her, to wake her up. The first thing that Cloud says in response to what he's just witnessed is, "This can't be real." Again, the first stage of grief, denial. It's then that, for the very first time in his entire life, we begin to see Cloud try to understand these emotions of anguish that he's feeling. He grapples with the reality that Aerith will no longer talk, no longer laugh, cry, or get angry. His body begins to exhibit physical signs of grief, and almost confused and trying to comprehend them, he says, "My fingers are tingling. My mouth is dry. My eyes are burning." This scene is so raw. To watch a boy who has only ever used denial as a way to cope with his traumas try to make sense of the physical reactions and life-altering reality that is the loss of a human life is unlike anything I've ever seen in another game. The sequence of Aerith's death is, in part, and like so many others, what made me connect so deeply to FF7. It solidified it as my favorite piece of media of all time. This is the scene where I knew this game was something special. I love this scene. So, imagine my surprise when they took it out. In Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, things change near the end of the game. Drastically. I mean, the re-trilogy itself has always been different in its own way from the original source material, but as we near the end of Rebirth, they get especially strange for a lot of reasons.
What in the hell is going on?
Not all of which that I will even get around to explaining, as I'm mostly going to focus on Cloud's experience. Also because I have no idea how to explain this. The main story changes start happening at the end of the Temple of the Ancient sequence and snowball from there. The most notable being that right after Cloud and Aerith fall into this chasm, there's an entire sequence involving a lot of things, but it's mostly centered around a visit that Cloud has to an alternate reality, one where things are different. This reality is a doomsday world, where the civilians around you are all coming to terms with the fact that they're all about to die to a great cataclysmic event, presumably the meteor. All the while, in this tragic world, Cloud and Aerith go on a date of some sorts, doing some shopping.
Which one will he choose?
Trying some snacks. Overall, having a good time, and where at first, Cloud is uneasy and suspicious about all the strange things happening around him, he gradually eases into the charade and seems to be enjoying having his fun time with Aerith in a world that's facing its death. We'll touch back on this later. But first, I wanted to note that this sequence and the moments after it entirely replace a different scene from the original game. At this point in the story in the 1997 version, after Cloud gets possessed and hurts Aerith at the Temple of the Ancients, we get a really vulnerable scene that takes place in Gongaga. Cloud wakes up to find Barret and Tifa waiting for him. They tell him that Aerith has gone off on her own and that they gotta hurry if they want to save her, in which Cloud says no. He's afraid of losing his mind again, afraid of what will happen if Sephiroth gets near him, and that if he doesn't quit, he might go crazy. Cloud, our cocky, badass, soldier mercenary Cloud, for the first time in this game, admits that he's scared. He almost pulls out of the mission entirely, and it's only thanks to Tifa and Barret that he doesn't. He agrees to continue on thanks to his friends. Now, while it could be argued that this scene still somewhat exists in Rebirth 5 chapters earlier, in the scene between Cloud and Tifa, also in Gongaga, the fact is that after the Temple of the Ancients in Rebirth, this moment of vulnerability after Cloud gets literally possessed was taken out. So yeah, the fact that they replaced this scene with like a 25-minute convoluted and confusing cutscene is, at first glance, upsetting. But upon closer examination, it's actually fascinating. Take a look at how Cloud's behavior in this scene I'm about to show you differs from the one I just described.
I'm fine.
Didn't know if it was Mako poisoning or the degradation, but I thought you were done for.
Sorry to disappoint.
Well, you can thank me for the ride later. Gotta find Aerith first.
She told us that an ancient city lies just beyond these woods, and that the Cetra built a very special altar there. That's where she's headed, I'm sure of it.
Problem is, Sephiroth stole the black materia, meaning he could destroy the entire planet any minute. And Aerith said she's the only one who can stop him.
Where is this place?
No one knows but her.
We got separated in the fog, and she's out there, all alone.
Then we'd better hurry. that way.
And how can you be so sure?
Sometimes you just know.
Way different, right? Cloud doesn't show even an ounce of vulnerability here, even after, again, literally getting possessed by Sephiroth, hurting and scaring his friends, and giving over the black materia, the destroyer of worlds. Instead, he immediately reverts back to his confident and cocky nature.
Sorry to disappoint.
Instead of Cloud being spurred on by his friends, it's now the other way around.
Then we'd better hurry.
And instead of opening up to them, he actually keeps to himself more, igniting further distrust between him and his allies.
And how can you be so sure?
Sometimes you just know.
He doesn't even admit to them that he's the one who gave Sephiroth the black materia. Instead, he just tells Yuffie,
He beat the shit out of me and took the materia.
which, yeah, that didn't happen. From here, the gang follows Aerith's trail towards the Forgotten City. Now, there's a lot of different things that happen here. Sephiroth, whispers, a portal thing, and no Bone Village! I'm still upset about that one. But eventually, we make our way towards the inner sanctum, where Aerith is waiting. The scene plays out like clockwork. Aerith prays at the altar. Cloud approaches her only to lose control and take up his sword, and just as he snaps out of it, Sephiroth descends from the sky. What truly happens next is anyone's guess. But when the smoke clears, one thing is for certain. Aerith is dead. Again. At least according to everyone else. Everyone except Cloud. For a brief moment, Cloud mourns for Aerith when he thinks she's gone. We see interrupting flashbacks to Cloud's monologue about grief from the original game, but we can't hear what he's saying, nor does it seem like our Cloud is even saying any of it. It's not long after that we see a shot of Aerith's alive hand reach up to touch Cloud's face, telling him,
Cloud, it's okay.
Cloud smiles, takes her hand, and is relieved to see that she's all right.
Aerith.
Except he's the only one. As far as the party knows, she's been killed. They're ignited with fury against Sephiroth, and as a result, all of their limit breaks are charged at the beginning of the Genova battle. Again, except for Cloud's. The dialogue between Cloud and his companions from this point on in the game also feels disjointed. Cloud talks casually, while the others grapple with intense emotions after witnessing their friend die.
Stay strong!
Of course.
We'd best get moving.
Yep. Sounds good.
And then, of course, in the final scenes, Cloud talks to a version of Aerith that only he can see. The two of them smile and laugh together, giving Cloud a sense of comfort and normality.
Come on.
And this is instantly picked up by Tifa, who realizes that something is deeply wrong with him. Something that was not present in the original game and is the biggest change we have seen in the remake series so far. Cloud is in denial. Again.
You gonna be okay getting back?
And if I said I wasn't?
Remember earlier when I talked about the sequence where Cloud and Aerith go on a date in the Doomsday universe? Well, I'm gonna go back to it for a minute because I think the developers are trying to tell us something here. I mentioned it briefly, but Cloud's behavior here is very interesting in the way that he disregards his own apprehension and doubt in favor of just forgetting and having fun with Aerith. He gets more into it as they go, smiling, taking Aerith's hand, and later even pointing out stuff for them to check out. But it's as one character, the photographer, says it best.
Well, for starters, you don't look like you're on a date. More like at a funeral.
So yeah, if you haven't guessed it yet, this segment is, in my opinion, a visual representation of Cloud's mind at the end of the game. Whereas earlier in the game during the Zack segments, we see people grappling with the denial and anger and bargaining and depression that comes with the terrible fate that approaches them, this particular version of Sector 7 is different. It is literally a world that has accepted its fate. The people around them have come to terms with their devastation, but Cloud hasn't. He's still metaphorically at the funeral, still in those early stages of grief. He does not accept the truth in favor of maintaining his happiness. It's a mirror image of the final scene in the game, Cloud being surrounded by those who have accepted what has happened, and still he cannot. Hell, he even reiterates the exact same thing Aerith says to him in their date sequence to the party in the final cutscene.
You have to promise not to look up.
Don't look up.
Cloud's mind is stuck in this fantasy, one where he doesn't have to face his grief. When I first played through this section, I did not like it, because again, it replaced this scene where Cloud is vulnerable and accepting with one where he is entirely the opposite, closed off and in denial. The same thing could be said about how I felt about them cutting out Cloud's monologue about grief. I was so upset. But now, I realize that the direction they're going for this time around with Cloud fits in line really well with the way his character has always been. In fact, I'd argue Cloud is somehow more in character at the end of FF7 Rebirth than he ever was at this point in the original game. That is what makes this ending masterful. Cloud's story has always been one of denial and grief, and the changes that the developers have made in Rebirth have only been in favor of that. The way he responds to Aerith's death is not so different from when he responded to Zack's. He saw both of them get killed right in front of his eyes, and once again, with a little help from some supernatural elements, his mind shifted his own perception of reality in order to protect himself from the pain. The only difference, of course, being that when it came to Zack, Cloud's mind warped to think that he had never existed, and when it came to Aerith, his mind thinks that she still does exist. I know there's a lot of people out there who didn't like Rebirth's ending after a first watch, myself included. But now, this change that the developers have instilled in Cloud and Rebirth has made me more excited for Part 3 than I have ever been. I'm so interested to see the path that Cloud goes down in the next game, because where Aerith's death used to be something that spurred Cloud on and resolved him to take down Sephiroth once and for all, now, the only reason Cloud is still even after Sephiroth is because he's being summoned by him for the reunion. He doesn't realize it at all, but he's a wreck, still being puppeted by the larger powers at play. He looks the freaking black materia dead in the eyes and puts that thing in his Buster Sword without saying anything to anybody because he's completely compromised. He's keeping secrets from his friends, they don't trust him, he doesn't trust them. Overall, he is just so emotionally checked out. And I don't think people realize the kind of payoff that is going to have in the next game. I'm so excited. Some of you guys out there feel robbed, that FF7 denied us of Cloud's vulnerable moments, like the scene in Gungaga, like his grief-stricken monologue, like him laying Aerith's body to rest, for God's sake. But all the devs are doing is letting the pot sit on the stove a little longer. Instead of allowing Cloud to face acceptance at the end of Rebirth, they're giving him more time to suffer, to become more mentally unstable, to collect his denials like goddamn Infinity Stones until they explode in a moment that is probably going to be more impactful and more devastating than any of the scenes any of us missed from the old game. So yeah, I suppose I'm encouraging anyone watching who might be fearful of the story's direction to have a little faith. And who knows, maybe I'm the one in denial. Maybe I can't get over the fact that my favorite moments were taken out of the game and I'm grieving that loss. I guess we won't know for a while, but damn it, does it make for interesting conversation. But wait, the video's not over yet, and that's because there's still an entire part of FF7's fanbase that, if any of them are watching this video right now, disagree with one huge thing that I've kept mentioning over and over again in regards to Aerith dying. Did Aerith really die? So this is actually my first video essay ever, and it stemmed from an argument that my friend and I had about the ending of FF7 Rebirth. Both of us loved the game, we loved the characters, and yet we could not and still cannot come to an agreement because my friend was rejoicing over the fact that Destiny had been changed in the Re-Trilogy timeline and that it opened up the possibility for something that for the last 26 years had been impossible. He wanted Aerith to live, and believed that she did when Cloud deflected Sephiroth's sword. His hope is that in the next game, Aerith turns out to not just be a deception or hallucination created by Cloud or Genova or whatever, but a living, breathing person who may or may not be trapped in some multiverse shenanigans, and who, most importantly, when the credits roll on Part 3, gets to live out the rest of her life with the joy she deserved, and get her happily ever after. And my friend is not the only one to want this for Aerith, by the way. There are many fans out there, some of which might be here right now, that want Aerith to survive the ending of FF7 Remake Trilogy, and, based on Rebirth's conclusion, believe that she is alive, even though it's clear to the rest of the party that she's gone. Now, let me make it clear that I love Aerith. She's one of my favorite characters of all time, and was actually the only character that made me cry when I played Rebirth. But still, I could not agree with my friend. I didn't want Aerith to live. I wanted her to stay dead. And I know that might seem a little harsh to say, but here's the thing. My friend is right. Aerith does deserve to live. She deserves to live with her mom in their beautiful house in the Sector 5 slums, to take care of the flowers in the church that she loves so much. She deserves to live in happiness with her newfound friends that she spent her entire life waiting and wishing for and sacrificed her own life to protect. She deserves all of this. But she doesn't get it. She dies. And the heartbreak of that, knowing all that she still had ahead of her in life, and knowing just how much of a light she was in the party, is freaking devastating. It's a feeling of such intense emotion that I feel it cannot be created in any other way. I didn't want Aerith to live, because that grief is what makes this game special. It taps into an open, painful, vulnerable part of ourselves and forces us to remember that moment, to process it, to learn from it. Even still, grief is difficult to face, and my friend's belief that Aerith will be alive has since been unchanged. As I thought about my friend's arguments and saw similar sentiments of so many fans online who also want Aerith to make it out unscathed and think that she will, I had a striking realization that inspired the entire concept of this whole video, and that ultimately, truthful or not, is something that I think is worth talking about. Cloud and my friend are not that different, because Cloud's denial is exactly like that of the fanbase itself. Cloud is the fans. For nearly 30 years, people have not stopped talking about Aerith ever since her untimely demise in the original game. And since the remake has been announced, we've seen lots of that refusal of acceptance time and time again, from people begging the developers to, quote, save her this time. Even though, as we've already talked about, Aerith's death is what makes FF7 FF7. And yet, people still want to change one of the core parts of the story because they have this deep attachment to this expertly crafted, really cool, funny, just amazing character. And they, very understandably, do not want her to be gone. Cloud is the same way. He cares so much for Aerith. They might not have known each other for very long, but Aerith is able to access and bring out a part of Cloud that none of the other party members can.
And whatever you decide, I'm with you.
She's changed him, and he's changed her in a lot of ways, and they just have this really beautiful, meaningful connection.
It's okay.
So of course, he also doesn't want to come to terms with the fact that she died. And do I think it's a bad thing that some people think the ending will change and Aerith will live? No, not at all. In fact, I'd argue that it's the developers' intention to purposefully set up their audience to have that kind of hope and to continue seeing the story through Cloud's eyes. After all, he's our main character, and we see and feel a lot of things through his perspective. People genuinely believing that Aerith is alive is the same as how first-time players of the original FF7 are going to genuinely believe that Cloud is a soldier first class. He's an unreliable narrator through and through, and he's unintentionally fooled us time and time again. Bless his heart. Now, this isn't to say I think fans are only experiencing denial when it comes to the ending of the game. There's denial, and anger, and bargaining, and depression, and acceptance. But it's really interesting that the vast majority of debate I see online, besides pointless shipping wars, is people arguing over whether Aerith died or not. It just shows that this isn't a select number of people. It's an entire half of a fan base that's stuck right where Cloud is. That's crazy, and honestly, my hat goes off to the devs, because at least in my opinion, I think this was their plan all along. These unknowingly grieving people are right where the devs want them, filled with hope and believing the delusions in Cloud's head as he believes them himself. That's right, I think the developers are setting up to shamelessly break the hearts of Cloud and the players, exposing to all of them the reality that Aerith truly cannot be brought back to life, and forcing them to continue through the rest of the grieving process. Not only do I think the devs are going to do this because it makes sense narratively, but there's also a lot of signs that point to this being the case. Just take the date scene again. The devs added an entire gameplay sequence hammering home to the player not once, not twice, but 3 times that no matter what you choose.
That one.
Ah, I'm so sorry. I meant everything but that one.
No matter what you do,
I'll take one of those.
Though these aren't the only treats I've got, you know.
you cannot change fate.
Cutest looking couple gets their photo taken.
You cannot change Aerith's fate. More specifically, I interpreted this as a sign to the players that human death is not something that can be undone. But we don't have to analyze the game to come to this conclusion. Take it from the devs themselves. I'd like to close with a very recent quote from Yoshinori Kitase in an interview with Anime News Network just this last September. In regards to Rebirth's ending, he says, "When discussing the scenario with Tetsuya Nomura and Kazushige Nojima, we were also talking about how in the original, it's showing Cloud's perspective. His feeling of immense loss, of losing someone that you love, and having this hole in your heart. When considering how to depict this in the remake series, we also thought about not only expressing this loss of someone who means so much to you, but also this sense of a person experiencing loss, being unable to force himself to forget this person, and almost like an inability to accept it."
I get it, I really do. Knowing that the people we love aren't really gone, it doesn't make it any easier to let them go. It still hurts.
As I come to a conclusion for this video, I honestly have to admit that I'm not even sure what the message is I'm trying to get across. Maybe this video is about reassuring worried fans who fear that FF7 might be losing what makes it special. Maybe it's to encourage fans who want Aerith to survive the ending to reconsider the importance and lesson of her death. Maybe it's a plea to the devs to protect FF7's uniqueness and unwavering commitment to the moral of loss. I'm honestly not sure. But I do know one thing for certain. To answer the question posed at the beginning of this video, the thing that makes Final Fantasy VII revolutionary and special in comparison to other video games before it is that it allows us to experience genuine grief alongside its characters. Because of that, we are able to attach ourselves to it. Because of that, we're able to care about it. Because of that, we're able to celebrate it. So maybe that's all this video is. A celebration of a game that continues to touch the lives of so many because of its fearlessness to emulate the painful reality of our world, to ditch the Hollywood bullshit, and deliver a truthful, emotional, meaningful experience unlike anything. I'm happy to say that I'm excited for Part 3. I have faith that the third game will deliver on allowing us to feel those hurtful but important feelings again. And maybe even finally give us the moment where Cloud, after coming to terms with his grief, lowers Aerith's body to rest in the blue waters once and for all, never to return.